You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.
Hello, and welcome out there in podcast land. You have reached Johnny Has the Keys in this wonderful holiday season. We are back again this week. This is a podcast where two old friends get together and we discuss movies, television, horror, and science fiction genres, the keys that influence the works that we're talking about, and how those works went on and influenced other works. My name is David. I'm here with my good friend Tim. Hey, Tim, how are you?
I'm great, David. I'm in the holiday spirit. Just
you
what?
Are
less than 2 weeks till Christmas, I think.
All Christmassy on this there. Look at that.
Yeah. We got about 11 days.
Yeah. So if you were joining us for the first time, we want to say welcome and glad you landed on us. Hope you like it and enjoy it. If you're a returning person, yay! Thank you for coming back. But Tim, what have you been up to? What have you been doing?
Oh my gosh. What have I been doing? I have been watching a lot of horror movies. Imagine that.
Yeah. Okay. Really? Duh.
I've been diving into some that I haven't seen before. Good Lord. Most of the ones that come to mind are black and white. I watched Spider Baby the other day. Have you ever seen
Spider Baby? I don't think, darn. It wasn't on my list. I'll have to put it on my Christmas wish list of Spider Baby.
I can't remember who directs it, and it probably doesn't matter. But it was roughly, I think, 1960, black and white movie with Lon Chaney Jr. and also a very young Sid Haig, who recently passed away.
Yes.
It is a crazy movie. And the only thing I can say is that it is full of keys, even though it's not necessarily a great movie. You can definitely see where Texas Chainsaw Massacre and House of a Thousand Corpses were born out of it. So that being said, it's an influential movie. And I can watch Lon Chaney Jr. in anything because he was kind of a problematic actor, and it's just kind of fun to watch him sometimes.
Right.
So I also watched one that you'll love, which was The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
Yes.
Yeah. Great
Harryhausen.
Yeah, it was a big budget movie with Harryhausen doing the effects. So that's why the effects looked so much better than the average big monster movies of the time, the B movies. And the music's great. It's just I was shocked that I had never seen it, so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna watch this.
Okay,
so
that's the one with the bathysphere, right? Yeah, the monster, doesn't it attack a little bathysphere underwater?
Yes, it's like a little thing they had lowered down with
a diving bell they used to call it.
It's like a big metal I don't know, it looks like a fishing lure or something.
Yeah.
And it ends up being one, actually. It's also the one where it attacks the lighthouse. That's a great scene.
That's a good scene.
And then eventually ends up in New York City, which of course is the climax.
Well, they all do. They all have to go to New York City.
Yeah.
Unless later on when suddenly it's they're destroying Los Angeles. That's the other one. So like, what is it? 3 million miles to Earth, the other Harryhausen one, and that's where it destroys Los Angeles. It's that little thing that grows out of the spaceship.
Isn't it years? Is it 3 million years to Earth?
I think it's miles.
Okay, because I get them confused. There's so many of them out there with numbers.
Yeah.
And there's the one with Raquel Welch too. That's back in time.
Oh, that's 1 million years BC.
Yes.
The fur bikini.
Yes, exactly. And then I kind of went on to the other side of the pond and I checked out a Freddie Francis film I had never seen. It's a Hammer movie that was filmed in '63, but not in color. It's in black and white, and it's called Paranoiac. And it has Oliver Reed, who we'll be talking about later today, I'm certain. It's more of a Hitchcock type movie. It's very Hitchcock, actually. Very creepy, about a young lady that's gone somewhat mad because her brother supposedly killed himself. Her selfish brother, Oliver Reed, is waiting on the inheritance, and then her brother mysteriously turns up, not dead. And
Okay.
so you've got like a mystery within a mystery, and they bring some horror in there too, but not monster or supernatural horror. It's all psychological thriller kind of stuff. Highly recommended. Highly recommended. You should see it.
I have a question. How do you select your movies? What criteria do you use to suddenly, I'm going to go from, Paranoiac to, or Spider Baby to Paranoiac? How did that happen?
And the Beast from 20,000
And the
Fathoms.
Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Yeah.
Well, I'm not. Wow. That's a good question, and it's a multifaceted answer.
Okay.
A lot of times I'm discouraged by the glutton of crap that is out there on Netflix that is no good, that is horror. Now, I'm not saying that new stuff is bad, because I've seen The Haunting of Bly Manor. I'm sure we'll talk about that later. I loved it. And of course, that's Flanagan, who, in my opinion, may be one of the best horror movie directors out there right now.
Oh, yeah.
But it also is availability. I have several apps on my phone. When my husband Dennis is watching the news and I am bored, I am usually looking at those apps and seeing what is out and available.
So is it, so is it a poster that attracts you? Is it suddenly, oh, it's Freddie Francis or it's Ray Harry? Is it the production team? I mean, it cannot be this story. You cannot say, "Ooh, Spider Baby." Sounds
Okay, well,
like
Spider Baby is kind of a cult classic.
Oh, okay.
I know I've heard Joe Powell talk about it. I saw who was in it, and then I went to Rotten Tomatoes, because usually if I go to Rotten Tomatoes and it's below a 50, actually usually below a 70, I won't watch it. But this one was higher up, and I was like, there's something people like about this movie. I need to see it. And it turns out the reason they like it is because it's just so crazy. I mean, it's just out there, wacko family of killers, basically.
So
Spider Baby was on the and it was on the Turner Classic Movie app. So there you go. I guess because it had disappeared for a while. I think it was found in the 90s, and they made a print off of, an original film stock or something. I don't know what it was. So it did disappear for a while and was not available. I did read that. And I like reading the history of what's behind these movies on IMDb.
Of course.
And I mean, whether they're bad or good. So that's a little bit of the criteria that goes in. And I mean, I'm a Hammer movie fan. If it's a Hammer movie, I want to check it out usually. And Paranoiac also had Oliver Reed in it, who I adore, and found out he's in two other Freddie Francis, or maybe not Freddie Francis, but two other Hammer films. Curse of the Werewolf, which I've seen.
Yes.
One of the best. I can't remember. The other one's either called Night Creatures or Nightmare. And it's going to get watched in the next few days. I can tell you that. Those I actually own. I have a box set of Hammer. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's that too. And then my second question, which I have, is that a Disney Christmas necklace? Because it looks like it has little Disney Mickeys on it.
It is. It's not lighting up because my battery went out, but I've got it. Once I replace the battery, I can do different settings. I can have solid or blinking or like a rhythm pattern. Yeah, it's pretty fancy.
So that's schmancy. Yes.
It looks great in the park at night at Christmas.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure of that.
This is a Mickey Christmas shirt too, I think.
It is. Look at you. You're all Christmassy, and I'm still here in the graveyard.
That's okay. It could be worse. You could be in the ocean.
That's true. Which, hey, what a segue we have there.
Yes. I guess we should let everybody know that our Christmas present and part 2 of our very Spielberg Christmas is 1975's Jaws.
Jaws. Everybody can now hum the dun dun
Dun, dun,
dun 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 dun.
dun, dun, dun,
Yes.
dun, dun.
We'll probably be cutting to that music and a lot more of the music. This goes.
Yeah, if we can
on.
afford it.
Yeah, there you go.
Anyway, just a brief synopsis of this movie. It was Spielberg's second feature film, if you don't include the TV movie Duel or that Night Gallery entry he had, which I meant to mention in our last podcast on Close Encounters. But anyway, this one is about a small island in New England, Amity Island. Roy Scheider plays the chief of police there. He is from New York. He is not used to small town life, but I guess he had taken his family there to get away from the craziness of the city, and all of a sudden finds himself smack dab in the middle of another kind of crazy with a natural, what's the word? It's not a disaster, but it's a natural enemy in the form of a big, great white shark that is systematically killing people of the town. And he also has a landlocked enemy in the mayor who does not want to shut the beaches down, and people keep getting killed. An oceanographer as well as a pirate-like fisherman are brought in, and the 3 of these men have to go out and hunt and kill this great white shark. So there's your little synopsis. I have so many memories of this movie. I mean, it's no wonder we picked it for Christmas. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when thinking about this movie?
This is my second favorite movie of all time.
It's in my top 5. I would say it's definitely one of the best movies ever made.
It has, like you said, I have so many memories associated with this movie. I have so many inspiration for it. Doing the research on it, so many of because there's tons of documentaries about the making of this movie, both novels and video documentaries and everything. And the several people have said, from Kevin Smith to Nicotero to several others have said, this is the reason I'm in movies, was because of this movie. Yeah. This changed I think it was Nicotero, I think, that I saw that said, this changed the trajectory of my life. And I think for me as well, it did. It was a huge influence on me and always has been. It still stands the record of this is the movie I've seen the most in a theater. I've seen this movie over 80 times in a theater.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I've never seen, I think 5 is a lot.
There were sometimes I would go twice a week to see this movie in theaters, because it stayed in theaters forever. Back then, and it was the first blockbuster. I mean, that's one of the big keys from this movie, but it was but it stayed in theaters for a year and a half, I think. And so you could go every weekend. You could go see Jaws and I did a lot. And then bought the VHS, bought the DVD, bought the digital copy. So it's a huge, huge influence on me in my life. And it's Steven Spielberg. It's probably his best. It's one of the greatest movies ever made. It literally is.
What was that phrase we used last week or the week before? Something is the necessity is the mother of invention. I mean, he really made a brilliant movie because of the fact that shark didn't work half the time.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I really think had he not had those difficulties, it would not be as good.
No,
agreed.
It would look more like a creature feature.
And I think it was also a coming together of so much. I mean, this movie has great technicians working on it who produced it, but also I don't think you can undermine Carl Gottlieb, who wrote the screenplay.
Mm-hmm.
John Milius, who contributed to the screenplay. This cast, which was phenomenal, and their own interpersonal issues that they brought into their performances.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that he was so, as Spielberg says in several interviews, he was young, dumb, and stupid. And he said, no one had ever told me we couldn't do this, so we did do this. And it works. There's one of my biggest things about this movie is there's a huge sense of place to this movie. People have said it was one of the first movies to be filmed almost exclusively, on the ocean. And had you told anybody else that, they would have said, that's crazy. You're going, no, don't do that. Film it in a backlot, film it in a pond, whatever. And Spielberg didn't know any better, so he said, no, we're filming it on an island in the ocean.
Yeah, it's only 30 feet deep.
Yeah, but it shows so much. And using local people as the extras and in the backgrounds. I mean, it has such a sense of place and reality to it, I think, all the way through this movie.
Yeah, agreed.
What
my
about
memories?
You said you love it.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say I have so many memories of it. It came out in '75. I was 10 years old. I, unlike you, only saw it twice, I think, in the theater, unless I saw a re-release. I've seen
It came out in '78 again in re-release.
I probably went then too.
I did too.
Yeah. My mother, I associate my memory with a lot of horror movies with my mother because I used to watch a lot of movies that were scary with her, and this was definitely up there. She didn't want me to read the book. She had read the book, but then she got a copy of the Reader's Digest condensed version of the book, which I have. It's around here. Oh, I see it right now.
Really?
Yeah, this is, hang on a sec. I can't see. This is the Reader's Digest condensed version of the book. Can you read that on the spine?
Yeah.
It's It and the Dogs of War. Anyway, this version cut out all the sex stuff. There was an affair between Brody's wife and Hooper in the book that's not in the movie. And so she let me read that when I was, fourth, fifth grade? Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
And then went to see the movie. My sister warned me about Ben What's-His-Face's head popping out of
Ben
the
Gardner.
Yeah, because she knew it would scare me. So, and then, I mean, there's all kinds of things. I mean, jokes in the family, don't sit on the toilet too long, you'll also bite your ass, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, lots of cherished cherished memories with this movie. And like you, it was also one of the first I rented when VHS became available.
Mm-hmm. I had not read the book when I first saw the movie, but then I read the book over the summer. And again, it really kind of was a nascent thing with me of, so that's how you adapt. That's how you take the essence of this and translate it into this movie sort of thing. What was different, all the differences and changes and how it was made. I was really glad they cut the affair.
Absolutely.
I think it would have cheapened both of those characters and Brody's character to have added it. I'm glad they took out all the mafia stuff. You didn't need to have that,
And also, one of my examples, and you've heard me say this because I've been saying it for decades, is that in almost 99% of the cases, the book is going to be better than the movie. This is the exception. This movie is better than that book. And I will always say that.
Agreed. I think the character, I think what these actors brought to these characters, the Indianapolis story alone, which is also not in the book.
It's phenomenal.
But that is like, and I actually saw a documentary where Spielberg said it himself, but he said that's the Rosetta Stone for Quint. That is the it encapsulates his entire character in that one like 3-minute monologue and validates the character. This jerk that if we like Hooper, we hate Quint because Quint's that uber macho, make fun of him, yada yada guy who's essentially blackmails the whole town saying, I'll catch this bird for you, whatever. But you realize with this backstory now from the Indianapolis story, why he is what he is and why he is the way he is.
Right.
So it's so brilliant.
There's other little brilliant things that I was going to bring up later. That I mean, you naturally want to not like Quint, but they throw things in there that make you think, oh no, he's not a bad guy at all.
Oh,
when he points out the first aid kit to Brody, just casual. It's a throwaway line, but when he does that, you're like, oh, wait a minute. There's
and a lot of that is ad lib. A lot of that is Robert Shaw, and Steven Spielberg. Little things. The lean forward when he goes, "Hey, Chief, next time you want to pull a rope, you talk to me, okay?"
Right, that too,
kind of thing.
Exactly.
Just little moments of. He was a brilliant actor. I mean, it's interesting. We talked about Oliver Reed. We talked about The Brood, and he comes from this same kind of, Douglas Fairbanks Jr. I'm going to drink, carouse, and.
Well, it's the whole Richard Harris, Richard Burton. Yeah. That I always stereotype them as a group of friends that are at the pub every night. They may not even know each other.
Well, they established that whole, mythos of London theater where, you want your character to die before intermission so you can go to the pub soon.
Except Oliver Reed has never been on stage ever.
True. But he was
it is that mythos.
That mythos that went with that British actor sort of thing. But I guess, because we'll go on for days. I know.
Oh, we will. We haven't even got to the beginning background of this movie.
I think, we're just talking about why don't we just go ahead and talk about background and try to do our normal.
You know what? It's Christmas. If we go long, we go long. So
but try to do our normal thing. So production wise, this was, like you said, this was. It was based on Peter Benchley's book. It was basically seen by Zanuck and Brown, and they thought Spielberg might be good because of Duel, because of the suspense he had created in Duel that they saw, even though he was a new kid.
Well, and Spielberg saw that as well, the parallels within their scripts.
Yes. And so they were willing to bank, $3.9 million on this new kid and see if he could do it. And that was a great gamble on their part.
67 million people went to see this movie when it was initially released in 1975, making it the first blockbuster film ever. Summer blockbusters that we're all well acquainted with in 2020. This was the first one.
It changed the movie business, and we'll get to those with the keys, I'm sure, but it literally changed movies forever. And so even if people don't personally like this movie, they have to acknowledge the fact of what it did, of how it changed the way we look at movies, the way we go to movies, the way movies are marketed. All of that came from Jaws. It was Universal. It was a Universal picture because Zanuck and Brown had the, I think we mentioned during, was it Close Encounters where I mentioned, I said, that's not Universal. Steven Spielberg has to be Universal.
You're right.
But he didn't say that. Even though this was Universal, his, Close Encounters was not. And Universal milked it for decades.
The theme park still does.
Oh yeah, remind me to tell you, you probably know it, but remind me to relay the Spielberg Universal ride story when we get there.
Okay.
But
is that a key?
Sort of.
Okay.
Sort of. Yeah.
The ride. Okay.
But
I mean, if
yeah.
you're going to go, I mean, other than the fact that it was the first blockbuster and made more than 100 million, we can't ignore talking about the problematic history of its background too.
Yes. Spielberg did want to film it on location. At first, they had picked, I think, an island near Nantucket or something, which was actually near where Benchley had originally conceived the story taking place. But there was some storm that like did a bunch of beach erosion and wiped out a bunch of
I didn't even know about
infrastructure.
that. Okay.
And so they couldn't do that. So Spielberg ended up going to Martha's Vineyard. And that's where it was shot. They hired, was it Maddie that who had designed the squid from 20,000 Leagues.
Oh, I didn't know that either. That's fascinating.
He had built and designed the squid in 20,000 Leagues, and that's why they hired him to do Bob Maddie to design the shark. And the story that I loved the most was he designed the shark, built it, got approval, had done all the tests. It was awesome. Let's ship it off to Martha's Vineyard. They shipped it off to Martha's Vineyard. And the whole time he had been testing and doing it and everything, he had done it in his freshwater tanks at the studio. And they took it to Martha's Vineyard, and within like 4 days, the seawater was eating away at the hydraulic lines and the rusting stuff and everything. And Spielberg was like, "Didn't you test it in seawater at least?" And he went, "No, I didn't. Sorry."
But what if he had? It would have still happened.
Probably, or he would have had to change it or whatever, you know.
Yeah. What kind of materials do you use that aren't saltwater corrosive?
But yeah,
I mean, you know, I don't know that.
But
there
it's
is
one
any.
of the. It's one of the big things that's come from every making of Jaws and all the documentaries. I think one documentary is even called "The Shark Is Not Working," because that's hilarious. What they heard all the time. Richard Dreyfuss relates that this was the first movie he was ever on where everybody had walkie-talkies. Before this, he hadn't really noticed that much, but he goes, but you would hear all over the island, "The shark is not working.
The shark is not working."
You know, and that's why then there would suddenly be a panic. If you ever heard, "The shark is working," everyone would rush and we've got to get ready and all that. But yeah, but like you said, and you know, dozens of people have probably said it in the 45 or plus years since then that had Bruce, which was the name of the mechanical shark, had Bruce functioned well, the movie would not be the same.
Probably not.
Probably not have been as successful.
I think Spielberg actually said that he was rooting for the shark when he read the book because he hated the character so much.
Interesting that then he changed it so much that those characters are what we remember.
Or Gottlieb did, yeah.
You know, one of my big things in it is what makes this movie work to me is what we've talked about dozens of times in these podcasts, which is it's not the creature, it's not the situation, it's not even sometimes the production values the way it's done, it's the characters that we're invested in.
Pip, people in peril.
And that's what this is. You know, the three main characters in this have some of the best introductions ever written in movies. All three of them are introduced in such unique and memorable ways. Brody is introduced in the morning, waking up with his family, imitating the accent.
That's hilarious.
You know,
that's exactly what came to mind. I've got to get the car in the yard.
In the yard, not far from the cat. Yeah. And, you know, obviously affectionate with his wife, with his kids. There's a family dynamic to it. It's such a great scene to introduce him. Then Hooper is introduced as this young kid who's made fun of by everybody, who obviously knows more than they do.
He's rich too.
And he's, you know, we don't necessarily get rich in the first beginning, but we get that he knows his stuff. You know, his first line is, "Look, do you have a paddle? No, don't do that. You're going to luff it, you know, and all that." And the way he goes, they're all going to die. You know, just, and then Quint the chalkboard and the shark and that opening speech where he just has everybody's attention. You go, okay, I got all three of these characters within the first scene. I know.
Mm-hmm.
And then throwing them all together, like you said, people in peril, that's
Well,
great.
and if you want to go backwards just a moment, talking about trouble with the production, Richard Dreyfuss was famous for saying, we started this film without a script, without a cast, and without a shark.
Yep.
Because he was the only one cast. Or no, actually, Scheider was the only one cast, I think.
Correct.
First, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Then Hooper, then Quint.
Yeah, and they arrived on set in location, and the script wasn't finished. And why was that? Do you know why that was?
Probably, but I can't remember.
It's because Zanuck and Brown told Spielberg they wanted to push the production up. It was originally slated to not open until the fall. It was going to open in November. And they said, no, we need a summer release. We need a summer movie. So can you do this in time for summer? And he went, yeah, okay, yeah, sure. But I don't have a script yet. And they go, So that's why. And I think that probably, in our companion podcast for Patreon, we talked about Gene Kuhn and his writing ability and how fast he was and everything else. And I think,
with Star Trek, yeah.
I think Carl Gottlieb is very underrated in what he did for this movie and the translation that he did of the book. And then together with the cast doing the ad-libs that they did, just made this the movie that it is. They did have production hassles in general. No script, no shark, like you said, then a shark that wasn't working. Trying to film in essentially the winter in Martha's Vineyard for a summer movie meant that the water was about 50 degrees.
I also was noticing that they kept saying they were getting near the 4th of July, and yet Brody's wearing a jacket. And I was like, I guess I never lived in New England. Maybe it's still cool in June there. I don't know.
Right. No. And then you're also seeing in almost all the scenes, especially with the mayor's hair, you see the wind.
It's very windy.
Very
windy. I associate that with the beach, though.
Right. You're saying, it's just the beach. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
But no, the water was freezing freaking cold.
I bet.
Yeah. And they had studio pressure. This movie was slated for, I think, 55 days of filming. They filmed for like 155 or 59 days. They went massively over budget. It was budgeted, I think, like I said, at $3.9 million, ended up costing more than $9 million. Still, who cares because of what it, like you said, what it earned after that.
Right.
I'm sure the studio didn't mind after that.
No,
but I think Spielberg's quoted as saying he was almost fired like 19 times, where they said, no, tomorrow, if you don't do this by tomorrow, you're out, and all that kind of stuff. So it was a struggle. Nobody, his ignorance led to a lot of brilliance, but also a lot of challenges. Trying to film, the last third of your movie's on a boat in the middle of the ocean, and you can't have any land visible in the background. So that determines where your sun is when you shoot these shots every day, and where you can shoot and when you can shoot. And everybody on the camera crew is on another boat trying to shoot your boat.
Yeah, it sounds like a nightmare.
It was, from what I know, there's like I said, there's several documentaries. There's a great book called The Jaws Log, which Carl Gottlieb actually published. And it's several people, Kevin Smith, a bunch of other people have said it's probably the best. Well, Eli Roth, I saw in one interview, he was like, said it is the best making of book ever made. And there's another one called The Making of Jaws, which is great.
I watched a documentary. I didn't read anything, but I watched one.
Yeah, I've got both those books because I've, of course, read them in my Spielberg worship. it had, so it did, well, let's talk about production. I think that wraps up kind of production and all the issues
yeah.
it had. You know, constantly repainting the shark, constantly trying to do something with the shark to get it to look realistic enough. And then when it wasn't working, now we suddenly have to improvise and rewrite these entire scenes and re-envision this entire scene that you already had storyboarded for X number of thousands of dollars. And now we're going to do something totally different, sort of thing. But cast, we've talked about cast a little bit. I'm sure you have some casting notes.
I've got a lot on casting, actually.
Oh, okay. Let's go.
Spielberg originally wanted Charlton Heston to play Brody.
No.
Well, the reason...
Damn dirty sharks!
Yeah, there's more to it. The reason he ultimately decided against it was that he had been the saving the day hero of all the disaster movies of the 70s, like Airport 75 and Earthquake. Yes. Yep. And he didn't want to cast someone where the audience knew they would win.
Oh, smart. Very smart.
I think it's very smart, especially when you think about how big those disaster movies were back then. That's why I mentioned that this is more of a force of nature than it is a disaster.
Oh, yeah.
However, Charlton Heston held it against him, said that apparently he would disparage Spielberg at parties, and he later turned down the offer of playing a general in 1941, which was probably a good thing on his end. But yeah, he was asked to be in Spielberg's 1941, one of the few films Spielberg did that has basically fallen through the cracks, I think.
It actually has a huge key at the beginning of it, though.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, the whole beginning is the same actress who played Chrissy swimming in the beach and everything else, except a periscope comes up in a submarine.
Oh, that's funny. I haven't seen that movie since it came out. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it is in my worship of Spielberg. 1941 is not one of the good highlights. It's not
Spielberg also revealed that that Robert Duvall encouraged him to make this movie, so they were friends. And he originally offered Duvall the role of Brody, but he turned it down, fearing, you know what? That it might make him too famous.
Really?
Yeah. I thought that was strange. He wanted to play Quint, but Spielberg told him he was too young.
The truth.
So Scheider became interested in the part after overhearing Mr. Spielberg talking at a party about the shark having to jump on the boat.
Right.
He was like, I think I might want to be in that movie. So other than that, Gene Hackman was also considered. He's still kind of a tough guy. I like Scheider. Well, I mean, Scheider was a tough guy too. That's kind of hard.
Yeah, he came from French Connection and everything. The thing about Scheider, though, is he portrays this naivete really well. And he portrays this, I'm out of my element, and I'm actually kind of scared of the water. And he portrays that whole fear of the water so much so that we feel for him. True. I think he's a big surrogate for the audience.
Yeah.
And that's what tends to work. I don't know if Hackman would have been able to have that vulnerability. He still has a macho side to him.
Right.
You know?
I like Scheider. I can't picture anybody but Scheider in that part. Also, Joseph Bologna was considered.
No.
I didn't think so either. And I saved this for last because it's typical, but Peter Benchley's choices were Robert Redford, Paul Newman, and Steve McQueen, all who were just box office draws at the time.
Right.
So
now Redford might have been interesting to play it. He would have probably had the chops to do it.
He's too good looking.
But I was just about to say, but he would definitely dwarf the other two in the looks department.
Right.
You know. And you definitely wouldn't buy that. If they'd left the affair in, you definitely wouldn't buy that she had an affair.
No.
But yeah, so that's Martin Brody, our essentially our hero of this story.
Right. We can move on to Quint next. Quint was played by Robert Shaw, who is phenomenal in the role, even though he was a little bit controversial and disruptive, I would say, on set sometimes.
Well, yeah.
Lee Marvin was Spielberg's first choice for the role, which makes sense. I could see that.
I could see that.
Marvin's response was, "I'd rather go fishing." Spielberg also wanted Sterling Hayden for the role, but it was another one of those issues, like I told you, with Close Encounters and Robert Redford, something to do with money. In this case, it was the IRS. Hayden apparently was subject to a levy by the IRS, and it just kind of interfered with all of that.
Yeah.
He was also a writer, and they didn't want to pay him union scale for acting, and something to do with buying the story from him. I don't understand. I don't know. Anyway, Sterling Hayden fell out. So Robert Shaw was cast as a recommendation from Zanuck and Brown, who I guess may have been affiliated with the Sting. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, because he was in the Sting as well.
Oh gosh, yes.
But that
Doyle Lonigan.
Well, believe it or not, this is the thing that fascinates me, is that Oliver Reed was not only offered the part of Quint, he was offered the part of Doyle in the Sting. And he turned them down because he is a Brit and he didn't want to live in America. So he passed on movies left and right that could have made him even bigger than he is in our yeah. So and I could see Oliver Reed doing this part easy.
Yeah, I could see that, but I think what Shaw has that I don't think Oliver Reed has is in those eyes you can also see a lot of compassion in Shaw, like I said, in the roles he's played. And you don't see that a lot in Oliver Reed. He's a very cold kind of individual.
He is a little cold. But I mean, and Shaw can warm up, like you said.
Robert Shaw in Robin and Marion is brilliant. He's great in Taking a Pelham. Every role he's done is memorable. He and they're also vastly different. That's what I like about, I have an issue with, you and I've talked about before, I have an issue with movie stars as opposed to actors. They both have their niches. One of your favorites is, Dr. Nicholson. And, he...
I've never heard him referred to in the medical vernacular.
To me, he is a movie star more so than an actor.
I don't know that I agree with that. I think some bridge that gap.
Yes, I think some do. But I think that, Shaw definitely, to me, is that consummate kind of actor role where he pushes each character in a weird way. And that works for me.
Yeah.
One of my guilty pleasures is Peter O'Toole. Peter O'Toole plays Peter O'Toole in every damn thing, but he's good at it. You know?
I say the same about, in some cases, Nicholson and definitely Bruce Willis. I mean, he does it too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I feel like Nicholson may go further into the acting realm than Bruce does. But I do think they kind of tread that fence or whatever, walk that fence. Yeah.
Yep.
The other person offered and that turned down the role of Quint, I'm curious to get your take on, was Robert Mitchum.
Ooh.
Yeah.
See, I immediately think of
Cape Fear.
Yes. Yeah. Why? Because of water, boats, maybe? I don't know. But
no, because of Bad Guy. I mean, that, and what's the one where he's got the love and hate tattoos?
Yeah.
That one. He's a great actor.
He is a great actor. That would have been interesting. Yeah. Again, this movie is so iconic for me. It's hard for me to picture other people in those roles.
I agree.
But yeah, I think Mitchum might have been a viable candidate.
Actually, I think several of those were viable. Oliver Reed's
Mhm.
viable, and so is Lee Marvin.
Yeah. Yep.
So anyway, well, we'll move on and let people ponder that to our third of the triumvirate, and that would be Matt Hooper, played by Richard Dreyfuss, who had only done one other movie at the time, and that was American Graffiti. I think he may have been suggested by George Lucas. I can't remember.
George Lucas?
Yeah,
Yeah, he was.
He initially passed on it, saying that it was a film he would love to watch but hate to make.
Yeah, smart. That was actually probably a smart decision.
Yeah, but he is timeless in the movie, and I, over the decades, I have gravitated to, oh, I like Brody better. Oh, I like Quint better, and now I'm in the Hooper camp. He is like my favorite character in the whole movie now. And I can't picture anybody, including these that I'm about to tell you, playing that part.
Okay.
Jeff Bridges was one considered. He went on to do the same thing in King Kong, but he wasn't near as funny.
Right.
Timothy Bottoms, John Voight.
No.
You know what? I wouldn't cast him in anything for political reasons, but we'll just move on from there.
We'll just move on, but yeah.
And Jan Michael Vincent, staple of television in the 70s. Not really.
No, see, that would be as bad as casting, what's the name of the mole?
Richard Thomas.
Richard Thomas. Yeah, no.
Yeah, but Richard Thomas is not a tough guy. Jan Michael Vincent was kind of a tough guy, but
no.
And neither one of them were the right tough or right smarm for that role, because not smarmy at all. And that's all Richard Thomas is.
Okay, a simple thing that I think was brilliant. The very, very first shot you see of Hooper, he is getting out of a boat up on the dock, and he's being helped up by Ben Gardner.
Correct.
Who is very tall, the way he looks down on him. And also, as we go through the movie and the watch movie, I've got there's probably 36 lines that are just so classic in this movie, but that's one of them where he goes, hello, and he goes, hello back, young feller. And he's just looking down at him. And Dreyfuss's stature, I think, works so well.
Right.
Later on when he meets Quint, it's the same way. Spielberg shoots it over Quint's shoulder, looking down on Hooper all the time. And that works so well. And Dreyfuss's timing and everything. Hope you're not going out with the rest of those idiots. It's great. But you wouldn't have had, I say that because you wouldn't have had that with Bridges, and you wouldn't have had that with Jan Michael Vincent, because they were both tall.
True. Well, I don't know about Jan, but definitely Jeff. I don't know that. I just don't see. I don't know. I will always associate Richard Dreyfuss with a sense of comedy or sense of comic timing, and some of those other actors, I don't see that with.
Agreed. Agreed. I think that's a great distinction of Dreyfuss is in all of his movies, even the dramas and the villainy and everything. He brings that humor.
He does.
Yeah.
Another person that brings humor was Kevin Kline, and he was offered the role, but he happened to tell Steven Spielberg that he knew someone that was an oceanographer, and Spielberg said, I don't want to know someone that knows I don't want to cast someone that knows an oceanographer. I want someone who is an oceanographer. So apparently something happened with him and Kevin Kline, and that didn't happen.
Obviously. Okay.
And apparently this is not on the record, but Dustin Hoffman has stated in an interview that he was offered the part, or at least he presumes it was that particular part, but he doesn't really remember. So,
okay.
And Dustin Hoffman, I don't think it's right. He's the size, the stature, he has the comic timing.
Yep.
But I don't know.
I think there would have been even more difficulty with him and Robert Shaw.
I think you're right.
Dreyfuss and Robert.
Yeah. I keep seeing Ratso Rizzo. in my head.
See, I keep seeing The Graduate. I keep seeing
Yeah.
the character in The Graduate. So,
And then other actors considered were Joel Grey, which that's an interesting choice.
yeah.
We mentioned Vincent Bridges, Voight, and Timothy Bottom. So yeah, the only other one I have is Joel Grey. So,
Okay. So yeah, again, they did right.
I think so too. I think so too.
Brilliant.
Ellen Brody was played by Lorraine Gary, who I always want to say Lorraine Gray. I always
I
see
do
that
too.
word.
Yep.
Like dyslexia.
Yep.
Victoria Principal was considered though.
Oh my God, no.
Can you imagine if this movie had her and Jan Michael Vincent in it? It would have been just a television movie.
Yes. Yeah.
Murray Hamilton played the mayor.
Yes.
Vaughn, and he was the only one of Steven Spielberg's original choices that is in that role.
Of course.
He was cast pretty much before they even had a script or a location, I'm quite sure.
Fine. Shoot every scene with him. He's fine.
Yeah, he's great. Mrs. Fincher was played by Lee Fierro. I don't have much on her. And actually, that may be all I have. I do have a story about.
Well, a lot of the ancillary parts, like Chrissy, the boy from the beginning, Deputy Hendricks, all of them were locals that he cast locally.
Wasn't Ben Gardner too?
Ben Gardner was local. Ben Gardner was actually the dialect coach for Robert Shaw.
Okay.
He actually
I knew he
Robert
had something
Shaw
to do
with
behind
the
the
dialect and with the and helped him get into that entire character so much so that they had to stop Robert Shaw in some press releases after the movie got so successful because he was telling these stories that Ben Gardner had told him, or the actor who played Ben Gardner had told him, but none of them were true, but he was telling everybody like they were true. And the guy had actually pulled a fake on him and told him that all these, these old wives' tales were true about Martha's Vineyard and the ghost over here. And this guy killed his whole family and all this kind of stuff. And Robert Shaw's telling these whole stories to everybody all over the world. And, the guy's going, those aren't real. Those aren't true.
That's how they start, though.
Yep. Yep. Word of mouth.
Speaking of which, we normally do talk about scenes before we go to casting, and you perfectly were segueing into scenes when you started talking about Chrissy.
Yes.
So do you want to talk about scenes that stand out? I mean, God knows it's
scenes
like
that stand out. Okay, start from the beginning and just every scene. I mean, literally, I was in my watch notes. I'm looking at it right now. My watch notes. Let's go. Oh my God! Every freaking scene in this movie is brilliant.
Well, when I thought about this, I thought about when we did The Fly a few episodes back, and you said there's about 6 or 8 scenes that are just perfect in this movie, and I was like, you know what? I think Jaws may have them beat. I think.
Easily.
Yeah,
easily. The opening scene is brilliant. There is little to no dialogue in it, but it is so well filmed, so well shot. It's shot day for night, which sets up day for night shooting, which works for this movie.
It's a haze filter, right? Or whatever.
It's an optical process that they actually shoot it during the day, but it looks like it's shot at night.
Right. It's
basically adds a lot of grays to the and actually changes the lens structure. But wow. That's the brightest moon in the world, obviously.
It looks good.
But it looks great, and it sets it up. Production value going into that scene where they wanted it to feel panicked, so they actually put her in a harness, and people were physically pulling her, but she never knew when. So that's why the screams were real, and the screams worked. His pacing in that scene, so even down to just the long shot at the end after she goes under, we hear that final gurgle. She goes under, and it's just then that one long shot.
Then you never see her again,
with the buoy dinging in the distance, and then that's it. And you go, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
We've already talked about the introduction of all the characters. Those are all brilliant scenes. The scene on the dock with Mrs. Kittner.
That's a great scene, and that's an actor's dream, because you've got two actors in the same scene staring at you. One is suffering because of you, and the other is responsible for her suffering via you.
Uh-huh. Yes.
I was like, wow, man, there's a lot of shit going on there.
There was one essay written called, I think it's called "The Slap Heard Round the Movies," and it's that scene and how powerful it is, and how much it guilt associates us with the lead hero. And it's a huge turning point for him, because the scene after that, again, a great scene, the scene with the kid at the table, going into the introduction of Ellen and Hooper, her saying, "I hear you're in sharks." You know,
that's great.
You know, but
I love I brought red and I brought white, and Brody opens it, pours them a little bit in wine glasses, and then pours almost the entire bottle in a giant tumbler for himself.
Yeah, for himself. Oh yeah.
I don't know if people ever pick up on that, but I mean, he is having a bad day.
If you watch the way Scheider does it, he pours himself first, and he pours and he pours and he pours and he pours, and then he looks over and sees Ellen and he goes, and he pours a little bit for her, and then pours a little bit for Hooper. Yeah. And then while they're having the dialogue, he's messing with the wine bottle. It's such a great little gimmick of just, you know, they say that, you know, people are killed in 10 feet of water, you know, and Hooper's, but that's after, to your point about, you know, Dreyfuss and the comedy going, is anybody going
to eat that?
You know, the blend of humor, of realistic humor, not farcical humor, but realistic humor and character humor with the fear and the terror in this is what works.
It's perfect.
Great example. We're talking scenes, which we could do for about the next 3 hours, but the scene with the two guys on the dock, I think is great. Just
that
their
was
dialogue.
One of my mother's favorite scenes. She always loved that scene.
And the whole, you know, can we go home now? You know, swim, Charlie. Just swim. Don't look. Just swim.
Keep swimming. Keep swimming. Don't look back.
Yeah. This is. I hope this is my wife's holiday roast. Right when you stab it with that big meat hook and everything.
Yeah. But I would say my favorite scene is the one though that you just talked about, with them at the table, and then them going to cut that shark open and see if that little Kintner boy is going to come spilling out.
Well, and see, and that tied together. You know, you got Abrams, I mean, Mayor Vaughn's character has great lines with that about, you know, now we are not going to perform some kind of half-assed autopsy on the fish.
Yeah.
You know?
Something about the little Kintner boy spilling out on the dock.
Yeah, and see him spill out all over the dock. And then that night when they're there and he goes, so let's go cut that shark open. And she goes, Martin, can you do that? And he goes,
I love that.
I'm the chief of police. I can do anything I want.
That's one of my absolute favorite lines in that movie, even though in a modern world, that line would be kind of offensive, but in that movie, it is so brilliant.
Yes.
Please.
You know,
do anything.
All the ad-lib lines in this, you know, this movie's credited with having some great memorable lines, and almost all of them are ad-lib. You're going to need a bigger boat was ad-lib.
Right.
The scene when she's trying to warm up to him and she goes, so you want to get drunk and fool around? He goes, oh yeah. You know, it's just so couple oriented. It's just so, they seem so comfortable together.
Well, and then some of the humor is not even because of dialogue. The scene where he's trying to get the boys out of the boat in the harbor, and she's like, they're just in the harbor.
Oh yeah.
And then she sees that picture of the shark biting the hull of the boat, and she just slams that book shut and says, boys, come in like your father says.
Michael, did you not hear your father? Get out of that boat. Yeah. Well, and you know, non-dialogue humor, the whole Quint crushing the beer can, and then Hooper using the star.
Which is if you want to get into the depth of superior filmmaking, is an echo of the scene with Brody and his kid making the faces and doing the same thing back and forth. It's the same with Quint and Hooper on the boat.
Yep.
And the cut.
The improvisation that Spielberg had to make was, since I can't show the shark, I have to show the effects of the shark or something attached to the shark. So the dock, you know, and then the whole dock turning around and coming back toward Charlie, you know, the memorable scenes, you know, Quint sitting there eating his saltine crackers, and in the foreground you see the reel and it goes,
yeah,
and just his reaction, and then slowly clipping in. All that suspense is awesome. The barrels, and having the barrels become the shark. You know, it's just the Indianapolis
the pictures
scene.
in the book when he's looking through and you see the mangled victims and shit. I mean, that stuff puts that in your head.
And yes, sets you up for this is what could happen, sort of thing. And they also have the foreshadow there. You know, it's a huge key to a key in the movie, which is they show the one picture with the shark with the tank in its mouth. You know, is in that montage as he's going through the picture.
I noticed that too. I also, and we don't have to get. I could get to it now, I guess. I saw a scene in my version that I don't remember. And it's not. I mean, it's a collector's edition, just the 25th anniversary. It's nothing special like a director's cut or anything. But I had read or saw in a documentary where the scene where the boys are attacked in the harbor and the man on the boat gets between them and the shark. I remember that man going over and just seeing that leg float to the bottom of the water. That's all I remember. In this version, I saw a brief scene of the shark biting the man out of the water. And I was like, wait a minute, you don't see the shark till Scheider's dishing the chum. Where did that shot come from? No,
that shot's always been there, but most people don't remember it. You see an overhead shot of just you see just the color of the shark, basically.
You see it pull him off the boat.
Pull him off the boat.
Yeah.
You see the leg go down. Then it cuts to the boy in the water. Then it cuts to a side shot of the boat, and you see the shark come up behind him.
See, I don't remember that shot. That's the shot I'm talking about. I don't remember that. I thought you didn't see him out of the water till Brody on the boat.
And I may have to do some research, but I'm fairly certain that was always been in there, because I remember reading a disputed thing, because people say you don't even see the shark for an hour and 20 minutes. And that's when Brody is chumming and says, why don't you have Hooper come down and shovel some of this shit, and then it appears. Well,
I definitely remember seeing the shark underwater biting the guy and pulling him away. I just don't remember them cutting to the boy, then cutting back to the shark coming up out of the water.
And it's a real quick shot. It's just open mouth going. You don't even see it bite or anything. But
because you don't see the shark when the Kintner boy gets it. You kind of see a fin, and that's about it. You don't really see the shark.
Right. And this is a great segue, I think, because one of the things that we haven't tapped on in all this, as far as brilliance of this movie, is the music.
Right.
And one of the things that I think is brilliant about this, and I think it's been said in documentaries too, is Williams doesn't lie with the music. He doesn't cheat or he doesn't lie. If the shark is present, you hear the theme. If it's not, you don't. So like even early on when they all, nobody's getting in the water, please get in the water. And he takes his terrified family in the water, and everybody's swimming around, and it even cuts to underwater, and you see them all kicking and swimming. There's no music.
Right.
So even though we see the fin and it's approaching and the woman gets panicked and she turns over the raft and all that, there's no music because
the shark is in the harbor.
Then we cut to the woman seeing it, and you suddenly
right.
And she goes, shark in the pond. There's a shark.
Right.
But Williams' music, not just the theme, which I think is brilliant and is so simple but works so well. From the opening frame second of the movie, that's what you hear, because that whole opening shot of the credits is from the shark POV, which is a huge key for me, by the way. I think that because it predates even Halloween with the killer POV at the beginning of a movie.
Oh yeah, it does.
This is
Halloween is a very good. I didn't even think about that.
This is the killer's POV from the very beginning of the movie, in the credits sequence. And But his other music too, I love because of course I bought the album and I own it, and I've got the CD and I've got it on digital.
You're talking
But,
about like the pirate kind of theme when they're
yeah,
out
his
in
pirate
the,
theme
yeah.
for the boat, his what they call promenade, which is that wonderful kind of polka sound of when everybody's coming for the 4th of July. That boom, 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 boom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the dynamic music with all the strings when Quint finally relents and says, "What can you do with this stuff?" And he says, "I'm going to get in the shark cage." And they start building the cage, and it goes that da-da-dum, da-dum, dum, da-da-dum, dum, dum, dum,
Yeah.
dum, dum. Excellent music.
That's
all
another
the way
demonstration of Quint that deepens that character too.
Oh
because
yeah,
he realized he fucked up, and now
and the way they do that shot progression of him going down, looking at everything sinking, he looks over, and we show the life jackets, which he said he would never wear again.
Right.
He comes out suddenly. Now he's back in his original costume. He's changed clothes. He doesn't have the bandana or all that anymore. He's wearing his hat, his jacket, everything, and he throws the life vest to him, and then takes a moment sitting on the side of the boat, just looking around. And, you know, Hooper's in the foreground looking past us, and and finally goes, "So, Mr. Hooper, what can you do with these things of yours?" You know, it's just him having to admit that macho, that defy that macho attitude that he's had from the whole thing. Is great. It's another brilliant scene.
It beats the Indianapolis scenario.
Oh yeah,
yeah, which he knows back in his head. That's a scene we didn't mention that is like you said, probably the crown jewel of the movie as far as acting.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And that's when they're sitting around drinking at night on the boat.
And again,
showing
that sets up
scars.
something I wanted to talk to you about, because I know you're such a good writer and everything. I love the fact that so much of this movie has a little bit of lightness or levity or even pace slow down before something big and dramatic. And it endears you, I think, to the scenes. You know, you got the two old guys on the dock going, "Yeah, I'm gonna catch it with my wife's ham," and just go blah 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 before the suspense. You know, you've got the mayor and some of his humorous lines before the big attack in the pond.
It's very Stephen King, a lot of it. I mean, Stephen King had a lot of humorous characters in Salem's Lot, where they're in a sticky situation and the guy's taping tongue depressors together in the form of a cross.
To make the crosses. That's a really good key. But the writing of that whole one-upmanship with the scars, I think, was brilliant. With you don't drink to your leg, I'll drink to your leg, you drink to my leg.
And poor Brody's over there looking at his appendix scar.
His appendix, I love that. And so we all kind of laugh. Then we suddenly, boom. And what's that one? That's the Indianapolis. And Hooper's, before he says that, Hooper goes, "Let me guess, mother." And he starts doing the whole laugh. And then suddenly we go to, that music underneath the Indianapolis is brilliant too. Just those strings, harp strings, very water imagery. And so I've read too that
that story is just, I mean,
the original story. Spielberg went to a guy named Howard Sackler, who was a screenwriter, and he wrote a version, like 3 paragraphs, of the Indianapolis story. And Spielberg thought it just wasn't in character. It was very factual and very good, but it didn't have a character edge to it. So he gave it to a friend of his named John Milius, who we all know from, is a great screenwriter, even though, he did do Conan the Destroyer, but he did The Barbarian too. The Barbarian was good.
It's got Grace Jones.
But a great, but he brought back a 7-page monologue, which then Robert Shaw, who is also a playwright, cut down, and that's the one he delivered.
I think Robert Shaw was some of the genius in that. I mean, he
Well,
knew when to pause, what to leave out,
and
where to pick up.
you and I come from an acting background too, so I'll share the story with you, which I really like, of when they shot that scene at night. And Robert Shaw, after about the third take, Robert Shaw, this was before they did the Indianapolis story. They were just doing the funny bits.
Mhm.
So before they did the Indianapolis, Shaw came to him and he said, they've been drinking and everything else. I think if we have a little bit to drink, it'll help me do the monologue. Blah, blah, blah. Obviously, he had more than a little bit and was totally shit-faced and doesn't even remember shooting it. It was terrible. Spielberg said it was horrible.
I heard that story.
And Robert Shaw called Spielberg at like 3 a.m. at his hotel and said, I just woke up. I blacked out. I don't remember. Did I embarrass you? I am so sorry. Can I do it again? Please let me do it again. And Spielberg said, whenever you're ready, we'll do it again. I just want you ready to do it. He goes, I'll be ready. 7:30 the next morning, they shot what actually ends up in the movie.
Oh.
And so part of it was Shaw's guilt factor of having messed it up so bad the night before. And I think you see such a grand performance in him. I mean, he wasn't going to mess this up, obviously. And it is brilliant. It should be a monologue for,
Well, I was going to say that back when I was doing the acting gigs, I used to have a book of monologues from stage and from film. And whenever I wanted to use the ones from film, people didn't like it because it wasn't from a stage play. I'm speaking of someone in particular at Walters State Community College. And I wanted to use things like dialogues like that for an audition, because that, of course, it would be hard to top that. But I think I used one from Harold and Maude once that I liked. And the director held it against me because it was from a movie and not from a play.
Yeah, see, that's ridiculous. I mean, the performance is what counts. And what I love about it is once he starts, there is no interruption. Hooper doesn't interrupt. Brody doesn't interrupt. It's a monologue. He tells this entire story, and it's so well done.
Oh, and it's unified because it starts with how many went in, and then it ends with how many came out.
Yeah.
And everything that's in between is just magic.
And his capper to throw it back to reality is, well, at least we delivered the bum,
Right.
You just, man, it's
and the fact that Hooper also, as soon as he hears the word Indianapolis, he immediately sobers and says, wait a minute, you are in the Indianapolis. And that gives a lot of clout to the theory, because all of a sudden Hooper has a whole new respect for this guy.
Correct. I was just about to say that. You got it. That was, and that shows in the remaining scenes in that movie. There's a respect factor now that he has. And before he thought, you're just a stupid ass fisherman. I'm smarter. I'm richer. I'm better. Da, da, da.
Right. I have
and now he's suddenly
big boat.
Wait. Yeah. And it's not until Quint really goes over the edge with the engines that he actually brings it back to that disrespect. The focus on the characters in this, and that's kind of this is a mythological story. This has that very, it's structured in acts. You have the teaser, you have the whole stuff on land, the setup of the menace, you have the what are we going to do and how are we going to do it, then you have the last act of on the ship itself, that whole hero's journey too. But it's not, I think the reason this movie is on so many people's best movies list, and the reason that it still holds up is it deals with such human
archetypes,
I guess, things. It's human values. It's not culturally really specific sort of thing. It's a simple story. It's man against beast kind of thing.
Man against nature. Yeah,
man against nature. It's the hero journey. The big key I have from it, which is our Star Trek key, which is these three guys are id, ego, and superego. They really are. They're each components of one
Wow,
hero.
that's a huge key I never even put together, but it is Star Trek.
Yeah, they're components of one of our hero. And it's, as Spielberg has said it before, basically the story at the end is three men in a boat, which it is. It's very Hemingway. It's very man against nature. It's man against the big fish. It's Jonah. It's all of those kind of keys too. But to me, those three
Melville,
characters.
you mean Moby Dick?
Yeah, Melville. Well, and Hemingway too. Didn't Hemingway have Old Man
Hemingway
in the Sea?
did The Old Man in the Sea.
Yeah.
Melville did Moby Dick, and then of course John Huston did that movie with Gregory Peck, which was really the only big fish movie until Jaws. Unless you want to include 20,000 Leagues, which is really a squid, but
Monster from the Deep,
right?
20,000 fathoms. No,
and what I mean, and I guess what I'm saying is realistic fish movies, because you could also throw the 20,000 fathom monster in there if you're me.
There you go. But the archetypes in this, like you said, work. The supportive wife, who's a realistic supportive wife. Obviously, they've been having trouble. I love the one throwaway line where he goes, "Why don't you take him home?" And she says, "Back to New York." And he goes, "No, home." It's just a nice little touch, and goes back to, "Now you sound like you're from New York," kind of thing at the beginning.
I think it's I think that's depth of character. It means that she's not happy there and she's waiting to go back to New York.
Told in just
in one
little
line.
Brief lines,
right?
But
if you want to stay on her for just a moment, I could have done this in casting. She is remarkable in that movie. Spielberg cast her because he saw her in a television movie where he thought she was very relatable. But if you go ahead, and we'll get to these, but she came back to do Jaws 4, The Revenge, and she is terrible in that movie. She is so bad that I have never seen it since. And I just was like, what happened? Because you were so good in Jaws and now you're just so bad.
Well, I think some of it also has to do with something that I wanted to, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I was through. I was just going to say that Lorraine Gary, who I always want to call Lorraine Gray, is phenomenal in this movie with a little line like that gives depth of character, but then jump ahead to a sequel 4 movies later and she's the lead and she's just terrible.
I think some of it has to do with something that I think a lot of filmmakers don't appreciate, but a lot of the filmmakers that I love do appreciate, like a Spielberg or a Coppola or whatever, which is because he didn't have a script to begin with. They did a lot of bonding at the beginning. They did a lot of improv. They did a lot of bonding as a cast and rehearsals. The scenes that they did have, they rehearsed and decided to rewrite this or improv this or ad-lib this. And I think that kind of gives you some, rather than just show up on set, say what the pages you read on the airplane and get them done. There's a lot to be said for rehearsal with a cast.
I'll go a step further and say it's Spielberg's gift to seeing people's strengths, and he probably knew that she was not a lead actor, that she was a supporting, and gonna be good with one line dialogues and things, and then they put her in the lead in a movie and she can't carry it because she's not that strong.
Yep.
So I would
totally agree.
I would definitely say Stephen probably just recognizes that in people. I mean, he obviously recognized that Charlton Heston was wrong for the role. I mean, that was a huge. This is his second film. That took some gonads, to say no, Chuck, you can't do it.
Well, the biggest key. I mean, I have it in my huge bold on my notes of the biggest key from this movie is it really gave us Steven Spielberg. It really did. It established. If this movie had bombed, if Bruce had worked and this movie had bombed, we probably wouldn't hear from Spielberg, or he would have gone to television. Maybe. I mean, I still think he's a genius, and he might have done it just because I like him. But the odds are the big key that came from this movie is it set him up. And he said in interview after interview, because of the success of Jaws, I could make the movies I wanted.
Yeah, they would have never continued to give him money for Close Encounters had this
No.
movie not happened. There's no way.
No. And it propelled him into the stratosphere, where he is.
Mm-hmm.
Just trying to look through some notes.
I was going to move on to Oscars if we're done with scenes. I mean, like you said,
we're never done with
scenes
scenes from Jaws because they're all
I know.
good.
But we did get to the Indianapolis, which I felt like we needed to.
Yes.
I mean, other scenes, obviously, Hooper.
Well, I mean, there's so many, like I
cage.
said, there's so many iconic scenes. There's so many iconic lines. I love that. I want these little pain happy bastards found and strung up by their Buster Browns. It's just.
When I was hearing lines like that, I was like, some of this reminds me of Greater Tuna.
It's great.
Yeah.
But that whole scene, the whole scene where where Hooper is trying to talk to the mayor about it, going, I think that you're going to ignore this particular problem until it swims up and bites you in the ass.
Yeah.
That
reminds me of one thing I did want to say about scenes. The scene where everybody wants the $3,000 and all the boats are going out and it's crazy. And you always feel so sorry for that dog that's on top of that boat. I'm like, what the fuck are those people doing? I always thought that scene was crazy, but then I watched the documentary that had deleted scenes.
Oh my God.
They're like taking guns and shooting at each other and stuff. I was like, are you kidding me? It's like this damn war on the water.
Oh yeah. That frenzy is crazy.
Yeah. Throwing blood everywhere, shooting guns, shooting flare guns, the dogs on the boat. I was shocked. I was so glad he cut that back because it's crazy enough as it is, but to have people out there doing that was just nuts.
Okay, and you reminded me of something. There's 3 sequences in this movie that I really like that I cannot remember another movie doing as well, which is dialogue under the music as the scene is ending, or even as we're going into long shots, or even as we're going into another scene. And that was one of them, because at the end, you keep hearing Ben Gardner's voice, the character Ben Gardner, during that whole scene about, what are you trying to do, Sluffish, you son of a bitch, get the move your thing, and he's just droning on. I love that. Spielberg does it again when they all go out to sea, when you hear Quint doing all this stuff about, if you got to go to the bathroom, stick your ass through the little porthole there, chief, and all those lines. And then the last time is when Brody is terrified after the first encounter with the shark, and Quint is just standing on the end of the bridge with the gun, with the spear gun, and he's on the very end, and Hooper's driving, and Brody's up with Hooper. He's going, so we're going to go back, right? We're going to get a bigger boat because what we need, it's too dark. We can call a Coast Guard, and it's just the sun is setting, and the music's getting all soft, and it's just pulling away, and you just hear Brody. We're going to get a bigger boat, right?
No, I can't think of any specific examples.
I could not think of another. I was trying to think, is there another movie that does that?
I mean, if anything, Spielberg's done it again because he knew to do it then. I'm sure he's done it again.
Maybe.
But I will tell you something funny about what you said when you were talking about Ben Gardner and all the underlying voices. I read this in the IMDb trivia, and it just kind of cracked me up because it reminded me of stuff we used to do on homemade movies. And it says the process of looping background crowd dialogue was, up until this point, done by taking library crowd sounds, like, stock footage.
Mm-hmm.
Jaws invented the process of a bespoke crowd ADR. Is that, what does that mean? ADR? Something reality, maybe?
No, it's shoot. I have to look it up to find out exactly. But
anyway, they used a group that included, get this, Michael McKean, Harry Shearer, Archie Hahn, and Howard Hessman. So Perfect. You could have been hearing their voices in that scene you're talking about where you heard Ben Gardner.
Yep.
because it's like the cast of The Simpsons background characters is doing the background vocals in this movie that they dubbed in.
Which perfect segue to a little bit of trivia. The scene where the kids have the cardboard shark, and you're hearing, before that, because they're patrolling the waters, Hooper,
the voices
Hendricks,
of like the police or the Coast Guard or whatever. Yeah.
Near the police and the Coast Guard. One of those voices is Steven Spielberg. He actually does one of those voices. That's
because I was thinking, who is it? Howard Hessman? Maybe. I don't know.
Automated dialogue replacement. Re-recording dialogue of an original artist.
There you go.
So like what we used to call looping or dubbing.
Exactly. And I see where, to go on the cheap, it would be like using stock footage, but it's just audio footage, for lack of better words. Mm-hmm. This was actually created using these specific actors, most of which I think have been on The Simpsons, or at least, definitely character actors from sitcoms in the 70s and 80s.
Oh, yeah.
So I just found that fascinating. So I'm glad I copied that little note and you brought that up. So
scenes. We didn't mention the probably iconic scene in this movie with the biggest jump scare, which is with Ben Gardner.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the chum scene, but yeah.
To me, I mean, that's a bank scare, but not a jump scare. The head in the boat is a freaking jump scare, dude. I mean, that even watching, I've told you, I've watched that movie probably over 100 times. And even this last week, watching it again, when it doesn't come on the, Williams' music is perfect because you don't expect it. But then once you see it and the jump is there, then you hear all the strings doing this. You see Hooper scream
underwater, which is great.
But that whole scene leading up to it's great too.
Well,
one of my favorite pieces of music, which is the Aurora music, all the night music. The Aurora is a cool boat. Why they didn't take that instead of Quint's?
It's not as big.
Yeah.
I was thinking that too. Let's go back to the scene with Ben Gardner's head. And another unseen hero of this movie is a woman named Verna something. Verna Fields was the editor of this movie. And she was the one that kept saying, bring me some film, please, because he was getting so little shot at a time. And he ended up taking the finished film and editing it with her in her house. And she had a swimming pool. And Spielberg himself says, I got guilty because I wanted another scare. So they filmed that scene with that head popping out in her swimming pool. And added it into the film. So I guess they put a tarp over her pool and somehow
they brought Richard Dreyfuss over, filmed that whole scene.
Actually, I don't even know if it was Richard Dreyfuss because some of those scenes with him in a mask are not him, but it could have been.
I think they did, though. I think I saw once in one essay or something that they actually did have Dreyfuss for one day of shooting. But
yeah. So anyway, not only was she the editor that put together this masterpiece, they also filmed the horror, scary head scene in her swimming pool, which I just found very, very funny.
They did. I've got some other little trivia things like that, which are kind of cool. The original, the Orca itself, the boat, Quint's boat, the original boat that they renamed the Orca was called the Warlock. And it was a real boat. And they made a fiberglass version of it that was the one that they could use for sinking and for the whole ending sequence over, and they could repeatedly sink it. And the story I wanted to relate to you about the Orca was, the fiberglass one was left on Martha's Vineyard, and over the decades has been cannibalized and pieces taken from it and everything else. And now I think the family that originally owned it and had it, there's only like little pieces of it left. People were like selling chunks of it on eBay kind of thing. But the original Warlock Orca was taken back to California, put at Universal's theme park, and used in the boat, the Universal theme park Jaws attack. And it was docked over near the pier in the background at Universal. And Spielberg has shared the story several times of when he would get either really, really depressed or really, really egocentric. He said either the other. Either I was too inflated or I was too deflated. I would actually leave my office at Universal, and I would go over to the park, and I would make sure nobody was around, everything else, and I would go and actually sit on the orca and just remember the making of Jaws and
Wow.
how painful it was, but also how eventually, good it was, sort of thing. And he said, and I did this repeatedly through my career. And he goes, and one day I went by there and the orca wasn't there. And so I called up the guy that usually oversees the park and oversees that area of the park and went, where's the orca? And they go, oh, well, it was getting old and everything else. So we just put a couple of chainsaws and just cut it to pieces and got rid of it. And Spielberg relates the fact that he has probably never in his life been that angry ever.
Wow.
He said that poor man who really was just kind of maintaining his stuff, but the things I said to him over the next 5 minutes were pretty terrible.
Wow.
But
is that the story you were going to tell me earlier when you said about the ride?
That was Spielberg's story.
It should be in the Smithsonian, like Archie Bunker's chair.
Yes, easily. Now there is some dude I saw just a little bit of you on YouTube, but some dude who has spent his life looking for Jaws props, and he has probably the most of any other person. He has like the strobe blinker thing of Hoopers.
Oh, that's cool.
He has Quint's gun, the spear gun.
Okay.
He has one of Quint's hats. So he has all these incredible props from Jaws. And I was going, you suck, and I want them all.
I want the tooth that Hooper dropped when Ben Gardner's head popped out.
I still have, sealed up. I still have an original Jaws poster.
I remember that. Yep. And you had 2001 and Star Wars. And the reason I know and thought about this recently is I watch another podcast on YouTube called The Focus Group. And John and Tim is a big sci-fi guy, and he has a framed original Star Wars poster behind him, and it's the same one I used to see at your house.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I have Star Wars. I have 2001. I have Jaws. I have Altered States. I have an original Altered States poster. And E.T., of course. That's back when you could get posters from the movie theater and before eBay and all that. Yeah, they just give it to you. We're done with that here. You have it.
By the time I started getting them, they were always out of video stores. Like I had a Hellraiser, I think I got out of a video store.
Yep. Brilliant characters, blah, blah, blah. We talked about Fields.
I can go on to Oscars, not just Oscars, but awards. The Academy Awards, it was a winner for sound, editing, and music, which makes perfect sense.
Of course.
It was a nominee for picture, but did not win. I can't remember what won that year. Can you?
I cannot.
Okay.
But I can find out.
All right. Composer, this is a funny story. John Williams was conducting the orchestra at the ceremony. So when he won, he had to leave the podium and run up on stage to get his award. I thought that was really cool.
That's awesome.
It is awesome. Of course, we've mentioned before that, it lost to Cuckoo's Nest, and that's why.
Yep.
And I can see why, because that's a great movie too. I don't know why I didn't know that. It was right there in front of me, and I just had you looking for it. Anyway, it's also the beginning of what we refer to as Spielberg snubs that happened clearly all the way up until probably Schindler's List.
Oh my God.
Win for the longest time.
Yep.
It was a Golden Globe winner for score. It was nominated for picture, screenplay, and director. It was a BAFTA winner, but for some reason, Williams won, but what I'm seeing in my notes is that it was for his Towering Inferno score. I don't understand that at all. But so Williams won a BAFTA that year, but it was not for Jaws. It was for Towering Inferno. It was nominated for actor Dreyfuss, director, film, editing, and screenplay. So at least the Brits were on to the brilliance of Richard Dreyfuss.
Yep.
And then lastly, I'm not going to go down the list of all these others, but it is included in a certain book edited by Stephen Scheider called 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die.
Yes.
Or get eaten by a shark.
Well, and I think it's on a lot of people's, top 100. I think it's in AFI's top 100 and a lot of other top 100 lists. For me, it is the second greatest movie ever made, in my favorite.
My top 10 changes. My top 5 doesn't. And my top 5 are like Jaws, Planet of the Apes, West Side Story, The Quiet Man, and Sunset Boulevard. I'm pretty sure those would be them.
Those but then good.
There's some that orbit around those in the top 10. So,
I'm just looking through stuff before we jump to keys in case I missed any.
There's absolutely. And I have trivia too. I'm sure I have all the stuff that you have.
There's tons of trivia in this. Spielberg is 27 when he was making this movie.
Oh, you know what? Here's a good trivia that's a special effects trivia is what we've always referred to as the Spielberg shot, which is the forward tracking zoom out shot when Brody realizes that Alex Kintner has been eaten. They call it the Jaws shot. And I've always, with you, thought Spielberg invented that. But he didn't. It was actually invented by Erman Roberts for Vertigo.
Vertigo.
Did you know that? I did not know that.
That was going to be one of my keys. Is that I've always associated, but in researching this again, I went, oh, no, it's in Vertigo because that's what they do for Jimmy Stewart.
Right. Okay. Because I did not realize that. It's been a long time since I've seen Vertigo.
I think its effect is much better here. But I think its effect too is because didn't Verna Fields win for editing? Did she win an Oscar for editing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sound, editing, and music.
Part of it was the way that scene is set up with Brody only getting a glimpse of the ocean and having to look past people's shoulders, and the way he keeps doing these wipe cuts with people coming in front of the camera, the way she edits that so that until the attack happens, Brody doesn't really get a full glimpse of what's going on. And then when he does and realizes it, it's literally a visual, I just realized something really bad. Kind of.
The thing I remember the most is that violin screech. It's like a stretching. And it's almost like the music is the effect of the camera, the sound and it's married perfectly.
Other trivia for this is, the poster itself. The poster was not really, it was one of the first times I can remember where the poster was the same as the book novel. The
original book was a little less detailed. It was just the shape.
But it was the shape of the shark pointing up kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the artist who did the original was actually did it because he was doing like a Good Housekeeping photo shoot or something and used the same girl and just had her get on. His name was Roger Castell. And he was a paperback artist, and he had published other books that were published, and he painted her with the Jaws poster and everything else, and that's how they came up with the poster idea.
Yeah, I did. I texted you that link of that book we talked about, I think last episode or the episode before, called Paperbacks from Hell.
Yeah.
That's got all the like 70s and 80s paperback art work. I will put that in the key or in the show notes so people can see that.
Yeah, that'd be good.
That's a cool book.
This this movie has the same kind of key association. I think it's kind of a weird. Maybe it's a key ring. How do we do it? I don't know how we associate it, but you know, Psycho made people afraid of a shower. This movie made people afraid of the ocean.
Correct.
You know, kind of parallel, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I have another music key. I'll get to it when we get to keys. One thing I wanted to say briefly in trivia, though, is that we've mentioned Carl Gottlieb, who wrote the screenplay, and Peter Benchley, who wrote the novel. Both of them were present in this movie.
Yes.
Gottlieb is an actor as well. He's like always with the mayor, in scenes with the mayor.
He's the head of the newspaper.
Right.
He's the local
like
newspaper.
The reporter.
Yep.
And then actually, Peter Benchley plays a reporter as well, in a rather stilted exercise in dialogue in front of the shark sign or the beach billboard. But what I wanted to say is that Peter Benchley was thrown off the set after objecting to the climax. He vehemently did not want Spielberg to blow up the shark. And you and I are probably both familiar with the story. I don't know if our audience is that, you know, if he said that if they were believing me this long, they're going to believe the ending. And he said, I need a big bang, you know, because people want this shark dead. They are ready to see its demise, you know, and seeing it drown slowly is not climatic enough. So they went with the idea of the shark and the canister and Brody.
Yeah, that was another difference between the book and the movie. In the book, the shark basically drowns and dies as it's about to eat Brody. Another difference is Quint's death, which is a great scene we didn't touch on, but Quint has a very memorable death in this movie.
Oh my God, it's just
and in the novel he doesn't. He's basically dragged under and drowns, and that's it. Big difference, and means so important because as soon as he starts screaming, you think immediately of the Indianapolis story where he goes, and then you hear that high-pitched scream.
Right. And then when you hear the crunch of the shark biting down, he talks about the, you know, people getting bit by the hour or whatever in the water.
He'd been bitten in half below the waist.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
and you're like, you know, and Spielberg knew, you know what? He's talking about something that's going to happen to him later. You just don't know it yet. So
you were talking about blowing up too. That actually started a series of keys for Spielberg, which is he never shoots his last two scenes, at least the last scene ever. He never shoots the last scene of his movies. And it started on this one. He actually got on a plane and was actually on a plane when they were shooting the shark blowing up. He wasn't there for that shot. And ever since then, he got, you know, he always attributes it to luck, but it's one of his superstitious things.
Well, I was going to say it's superstition for sure.
Yeah, he doesn't shoot the last shot of his movies. You know, so that was a kind of cool trivia thing that came from it.
And you mentioned the difference in Quint in the book and the movie. Also, Hooper doesn't survive in the book. He gets eaten in the cage, and they bring him back at the end of this. And
in the original edit of this, Hooper dies. But when they showed it to preview audiences, they hated it. They did not like it at all. And that's why there's a little bit of a weird sense of that last shot, because he had to shoot that last shot actually at a California beach instead of Martha's Vineyard. When they're both coming in on the
that's funny.
piece of driftwood was actually shot.
Well, it's very sunny. I just always associated it with the happy ending, you know, things are bright again or whatever.
Yeah, which is fine. It works well.
And I love the long shot in the credits where you see them so far away coming up on shore.
Yeah, for the whole credit sequence.
Right.
If you watch, you know, it's
like he set it up on a tripod and just let it roll. Yeah.
Well, the MCU is known for having, you know, the post-credit scene, but I love Jaws because there's an entire scene that takes place during the credits of this movie.
Yeah, they're just very tiny, very
Yeah.
far away.
There is a continuity error in this movie that most people never catch, but it is glaring to me because I've seen it so many times. But the sequence is when the fake shark, the kids have the shark fin, and they swim past a couple of girls who notice it. Then it cuts to a close-up of a woman, and she gets scared. She's in the water.
She's backing up.
And she's backing up, and behind her, you see a raft with a little girl on it, and a mom and a dad. And it's the same couple that Vaughn made go in at the beginning. Obviously, a city councilman or somebody. And he goes, nobody's going in the water. Get in the water. Right? But it cuts from that to another shot of a guy who's panicked, and he turns over the raft. Well, it's the same group.
It's the same group. You're right. I never really thought about it. Okay.
Yeah. It's the same group that he turns over. And then Spielberg cuts to an opposite side, showing the raft turn over, and you see the family and the guy and everything else. But it's the same shot. But all those but that's a continuity error that I noticed just because I see it all the time. But this was the first to have Spielberg's shooting star. And
there's more than one.
Correct. But the biggest one you notice is when they show the boat at night, right before the Indianapolis story. And the star goes across. I've got all these lines. I've just got a list of lines like he ate the light.
Yeah. Any of those Dreyfuss lines. You were talking about scene cappers that Spielberg will do something and then end it with a capper. I love the capper of that panic scene where they just show that deflated raft chewed up and washing up on the beach.
With the Kittner kid, yeah. That one, but remember, and I love, you reminded me of something. I like even before that because we're here, we've established, we've heard hum, bum, 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 so we know the shark is there. We see it, but then we cut to the back and Brody's still watching and all that kind of stuff. But then it suddenly cuts to the guy and he's going, Pippin.
Yes.
And it just shows the
dog?
The stick floating in the water. And without anything being said, Pippin ain't coming back.
No. And we didn't even hear the music.
No. But we had, so we knew it was there.
Right.
But that whole final, the music is coming to an end and that raft floats ashore with a huge chunk out of it and the blood.
Yeah, I was just kidding. The dog was not shown or we would have heard the music. That's what's so cool about it is that you just see the stick. Yeah,
floating and
Right.
And I've got another Hooper line, but it reminded, as soon as I heard it, I remember how much I love it. And I thought of you, but he goes, partially denuded bone. I said, Tim would love that line.
I love it when he says it came up from the Gulf Stream and he just throws that license plate. It's got Louisiana on it.
Well, and but Dreyfuss, the way Dreyfuss does, that's another great underrated scene. But the way he does that whole autopsy scene is great. As soon as he throws it off, he goes, the whole thing. Don't smoke in here. Can I have a glass of water, please? The way he's trying to stay so professional, but it's really good. Yeah. And then he ends it by goes, it wasn't a boat, it wasn't a propeller, and it wasn't Jack the Ripper.
No. He lays into him, and especially the coroner who had already said it was a boat accident. And he redacted it. He said it was a shark, then he said it was a boat accident.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Love it. Just such, we could go on literally for days. The whole way he does that whole sunset. You're talking about the end of scenes. They've had that huge boat chase with the barrels. And then they end with that sunset happening. And just the boat bobbing up and Quint on the bridge and, all of that is just so well done. And it's those moments that I think modern filmmakers, again, I'd say don't appreciate. They don't appreciate the quiet times and just the character builds. I think Flanagan does in horror. I think he's doing a very good job of that. But so many modern filmmakers want just, J.J. Abrams want beat after beat after beat. Let's go.
Lots of music, lots of color, lots of action.
Right. And you need those breaths, those moments.
You need moments of dialogue, too, that make you relate to these characters and make you want them to survive. Unlike
And even the goofiness, one of the things I love about your writing um, is the characters do things that you don't expect that are kind of goofy that are realistic. I mean, it makes sense. You under that situation with that much stress, you might do that.
Mhm.
You might burst into song, or you might do that, or you might say that particular line, or think that thought to yourself that actually you can show in a novel that you can in film.
One of the things, and I'm not trying to hawk my book, but one of the things with my character Will in my book is that if you're really that scared, you're going to do something stupid, or you're going to do something accidental that could end up being beneficial. And it's what Ridley Scott does at the end of Alien. When she panics, she slams that hand down and it opens the damn door and sucks the creature out. I mean, It's little things like that make things interesting. You can't have Arnold Schwarzenegger being a perfect hero. It's boring.
Agreed.
You know?
Flawed characters are also ones that we invest in and we like. Brody is afraid of the water.
He's terrified of the water.
And he's having struggles maintaining any kind of authority, even with the mayor, but also with Quint, with anybody else. Quint is an arrogant son of a bitch who you just, but you end up liking him.
Right. Hooper is probably brilliant at what he does, but he's judged because he's got money.
And he's the young one. He's the new one.
Yeah.
I think Spielberg put a lot of himself into Hooper. I think he and Dreyfuss said, I feel the same way. I'm a fish out of water kind of thing. This movie does have a key for me in that this is where I learned the term ichthyologist. I did not know that term until I had seen this movie.
Is that a shark expert?
That's a shark expert. Yeah.
Ichthyologist.
Ichthyologist. Yeah.
One of my first keys, since we're headed that way, is going to be, you're going to love this. And it's for more than one reason. It's Friday the 13th.
Huh? I've got that too.
And really it's at the very beginning, primarily with the ocean and that frenetic music. It sounds like what Henry Manfredini did with the music in Friday the 13th. And in Friday the 13th, it's the same premise. The killer's here, we hear the music. It gets scary because of the music, not because you see the killer. It could be the point of view, but not always.
I've got that as a key for me is Halloween and Friday the 13th, both the villain is played in music.
Yeah. It's like a stalker theme kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, and also it's a cue for us as an audience. Oh my gosh, now it's time to be scared because it's happening. One of my first keys is Alien, because I think Ridley Scott learned a lot from this about you don't have to show the monster until later. And that actually makes the monster scarier. And a lot of these will be initial keys, but so much of this movie has been mimicked in so many different ways throughout the decades. I'd mentioned Halloween being the opening killer POV. I think that's there.
I had not even thought about that, but it makes perfect sense. It's just underwater.
The Spielberg shot and the Hitchcock Vertigo shot. We had mentioned when we did Close Encounters that there's that kind of homage to this scene at the dinner table when Dreyfuss's character is first building the mashed potatoes and his kids watching him and everything else is kind of like the dinner scene in this. And I think that's a Spielberg key.
It's definitely a Spielberg. I don't know what the word is I'm looking for.
Like an homage kind of.
Yeah, it's something he does often. It's almost like a Spielberg cliche. Yeah.
Well, I had a key for you. Okay. And it's always
that was a funny dance.
Since I first saw this movie, it's always struck me. And then when I watched it again this time, I thought, there's the comparison key, which is Hooper has said, I've got to get this shark dart into the shark's skin to inject all the strychnine, right? So I'm going to stick it through the cage and reach through and take the cork off and everything else so that when I get hit in the back, I'll drop it.
I'll drop
right?
it. It's like
As soon
Evil
as
Dead.
I saw that this time, I thought of Evil Dead, where I'm going to twist the knife this way
so that I can get
and
stabbed
stab me
backwards by myself. Yeah. Yeah, it is pretty stupid. I do get pissed about that. That does make me mad that he drops that thing. I'm like, are you kidding me? Y'all did all that for you to drop the damn thing?
For you to drop it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I got a Disney clue. Or key, that is. The shark in Finding Nemo's name is Bruce. That was highly intentional.
Highly intentional. Yes,
Yeah.
Universal. Yes. And
Pixar. Yeah.
Yeah. I've got, of course, all the literary keys we already talked about, like Moby Dick and Ahab, and Quint being similar to Ahab, and also the whole Jonah and the whale and fighting the whale. I've got, how many monsters do we know after this movie are blown up? Like The Thing.
The Thing.
First
thing I thought of.
Yeah, it was the first one, but several, I think, after that, not to mention all the sequels that came from this. But even trying to, what was there was another one.
In Jaws 2, they actually set it on fire for a minute, too.
Well, they electrocuted it in Jaws 2, right? With the cable.
Oh, you know what? Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. I just remember he had like a scarred face.
Yeah, he electrocutes it with the saving the boys on the little dinghy part. But there was another one, the Deep or something, where they blew up the great big killer shark thing at the end of it.
The Deep was not about a shark. It was a very disappointing
the Deep was the
movie
treasure
for me as a
hunting with Robert
kid.
Shaw.
Yeah, I was expecting a shark, and it never happened, and it made
it was
me
a
mad.
moray eel. Actually.
Now you could be talking. I don't remember anything about this movie, but you could
Deep
be
Star
talking
6?
about Orca. But all I remember that movie is that Bo Derek gets her leg bit off by a killer whale.
Well, Orca is a direct key of this movie.
Yeah.
It's a ripoff of this movie, even down to the ending where it's the one guy fighting the orca and killing it.
Right.
But no, maybe it was Deep Star 6 or something. Anyway, it was another one with an evil in the water. Then they ended up blowing it up at the end.
That's a great vague title for a new thriller. Evil in the Water.
Evil in the Water. Yes.
I was looking through. I told you I like to look at apps to see what movies are available. I decided to thumb through Tubi, which is, I don't know, movies with advertising, but you can watch them on demand. And I never got through them. There was a gazillion horror movies on there I have never friggin' heard of. And you just made me think, how many movies came out after Jaws that had to do with that?
The big key that would come from this is, without Jaws, we would never have had Sharknado.
Yes, exactly.
I mean,
and that's more recent. That's not including the ones that came out in the 80s.
Megalodon or whatever. Yeah, there's so many.
Yeah.
There's hundreds. It's kind of a key, but also trivia, but Spielberg added the same roar that he had at the end of Duel when the truck is finally destroyed and dies. He added that to the explosion when the shark dies.
It's like a dinosaur roar from some movie he lifted or something. Yeah, I read that too. It may have been 20,000 Fathoms.
Shark Week. You wouldn't have Shark Week without Jaws, I don't think.
Maybe not. I mean, the Nature Channel has kind of grown despite that. But yeah, I mean, because there's so many of them now, so many Discovery Channels and things. You mentioned The Thing. Carl Gottlieb named 2 science fiction films that were influences on how that shark was depicted. One was The Thing from Another World, the original Thing, and that where you only see the monster in the last reel. And It Came from Outer Space, where everything was built up because the creature was always off camera. So that's
Great
2
idea.
sci-fi keys for you there.
I have a pseudo sci-fi key, which you'll love, which is the Rocky Horror Picture Show, because the poster for that said a different set of Jaws, and he was making homage to Jaws.
You're right. I completely forgot about that.
Ooh, okay.
I did not know this, so I will read it. But the limerick that Quint tells as they're preparing to cast off is apparently the same one that Shaw used during a limerick contest with James Earl Jones in a film called Swashbuckler.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? Swashbuckler came out in 1976, so I'm not really sure which was filmed first. But
well, 70, it was after it, I think. Swashbuckler came after it because
Okay.
it wasn't a very good.
I've never heard of it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I read somewhere where Spielberg feels that Jurassic Park was his version of a sequel to this movie.
Makes sense. You don't see the T-Rex till halfway through. Yeah, that makes sense. There's some, we always talk about keys as far as influences on direct things, but I think one of the big, like I said, I think the biggest key that came from this is Spielberg, but also the whole way movies were made, done, marketed, everything. This was the first major movie to be marketed on television. And that contributed to the blockbuster kind of title that it earned. Sid Scheiberg and Lew Wasserman. Lew Wasserman was the head of Universal. Both of them said they could have opened it in I think 800 or 900 theaters, but they intentionally opened it at only 400 so that it would create lines of people. As a matter of fact,
like The Exorcist.
Wasserman actually said, I want people from Long Island and Malibu and everywhere to have to come into Los Angeles to see this movie. I don't want to open it, but because of that, then they could also extend the opening and keep it longer. Like I said, it was in movie theaters for like a year. But it changed the way movies were marketed. And the reason I bring all that up is because one of the coolest things from this movie, if you'll go back, is the trailer, which had this incredible voice talking about basically reading Benchley's book. It was a killer from the deep, it only breathes and eats and makes baby shark, whatever. But it was an actor named Percy Rodriguez who actually was that voice. And if you'll look him up, he has a huge key to our sister podcast because he was Commodore Stone in Court Martial. He was the black Commodore in Court Martial was the voice of, essentially the voice of the Jaws campaign. He did all of the trailers for it, like 4 different trailers, and did some after campaigns when it was re-released. He was that voice.
Wow.
So look back at that trailer and listen to it, and you can suddenly hear him go, Captain Kirk, blah, 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 blah.
I actually forgot about this, and I'm going to have to read it because it's rather long. But I mentioned Friday the 13th because of the music in the beginning scene with Chrissy. But there's another key to Friday the 13th in this movie that is almost blatant and kind of unusual.
Okay.
All right. The actor who plays Alex Kittner in this movie, one of the first people to get eaten, is named Jeffrey Voorhees.
No.
Yes. This is ironic because his name, it's actually Voorhees, Vorhees, not Voor. So it's close, not the same. This is ironic because it sounds the same, but Jason was also a little boy who dies at the beginning of a movie drowning. Both franchises start with a boy dying in the water that sets this plot into motion. And in Friday the 13th, it causes Mrs. Voorhees to go insane and start killing people. in this one, it causes Mrs. Kintner to put a bounty on the shark, which compels all the others to go out of the ocean and hunt it down.
And
So
be
those
crazy.
are like some major keys to Friday the 13th that I had not considered.
Wow.
And it's well, they're both horror movies to an extent. So anyway, I just thought that was very interesting. And I read somewhere, I didn't write this one down, where she ended up accidentally having a reunion with him. She was like in a restaurant and he was the waiter or something. I don't know. They ended up having an accidental reunion with the two actors. I thought that was funny because, the kid would have been little when she knew him, but then he was grown up or something.
Yeah.
There are also similarities to Creature from the Black Lagoon when there's an old captain that joins their quest. Also, that monster's not shown until about the middle of the movie.
Yeah.
You mentioned Sharknado. I have that as well. And then the last thing I have is a subtle homage to, yet again, The Searchers by John Ford. And it's when Deputy Hendricks is digging in the sand with his knife after finding the remains of Chrissy on the beach.
That's a good illusion. That's a good one. I hadn't gotten that one, but that's very true.
And I didn't really think about it. I guess I've just never put it together, even though I've seen this movie a million times. But I always thought it was just her hand. But you can see her hair.
Yeah,
so it's
with all the crabs.
A lot more of her than her hand. And then, of course, when Richard Dreyfuss describes her later, it's even worse because you're hearing what it is.
Right. Yeah, and this movie had a PG rating. This movie, despite showing a leg fall and as scary as it was still a PG movie.
And the scene where Quint gets eaten, which is probably the most graphic too.
There were some little trivia bits and everything else that we missed. Like, do you know why the shark is called Bruce?
If I do, I don't remember.
It's because of Spielberg's lawyer. Spielberg's lawyer's name was Bruce Raymer.
Yes, I did know that.
And that's why he named it that. And we mentioned that, the shark was mechanical, but they also did shoot some live shot sharks in Australia with the Taylors, which was a couple that actually shot with you call them little person, in a miniature cage.
You're correct.
With real sharks.
Yes.
However,
that
did not go as well as they wanted, so they ended up just using a little bit of it. But there are a few shots that are actually of
I saw a documentary where they showed that whole thing, and it was terrifying.
Oh yeah, it almost took their boat down. I mean, it really did.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah. And I think that's basically it. Let me see if I have any other big ones. We have
the only other little bit of trivia that I have is that this movie is 2 hours and 4 minutes long, and there's only 4 minutes of shark time, or shark footage, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
Creature footage. So this is really a 2-hour movie where shark's implied a lot.
Yeah. The rest of it is implied and in atmosphere and the way it's shot. And filmmakers learn to deal with characters more than situations. We want to see that kind of story. That's what we like. That's what makes it endearing.
That's the meat and the bones.
And one thing.
The munching.
One trivia for me, and it always got me. There is in the beach scene before the Spielberg shot, as we call it. There's an old man that sits down with Brody and starts talking about, "You don't like the water, do you, Chief?" Da, da, da. And instead of acknowledging him at all, because he's trying to look past him and see the water, he says, "That's some bad hat, Harry." Right?
Yeah.
That line was actually picked up by Some Bad Hat Productions, which is Bryan Singer's production company. The same guy that does all the X-Men movies. And if you ever watch the series House, which he also helped create, at the end of it, at the end of the credit sequence every night, it says, "That's some bad hat, Harry," and it shows a little shark go across. That's his production logo.
And Bryan Singer's caught up in the whole Me Too thing too. You know that, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
He's like the Kevin Spacey. He's on the Kevin Spacey team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's not go there. It's Christmas.
But it's Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Well, I think we picked a good one. I think we've run double the length of an average podcast, which is kind of fun. But what the hell? It's Christmas.
Yeah, it's Christmas.
Any other final things you would like to
Nope.
say about this?
I would love to challenge people. If you do not like Jaws, please tell us why.
I
would
can't
love
imagine.
to hear people who, but I know there probably are. But I would love to see why, because I do think this is one of the greatest American movies ever made. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, I would agree. Also, we are going to be taking a brief break for Christmas holidays. We will be back on January 11th with a science fiction movie. Woo-hoo! And in the meantime, we will still be doing our regular series on Patreon, the Dilithium Chamber. We may be adding some new stuff on there soon. We'll definitely be putting bonus stuff on there. You can watch us as you are right now, maybe on YouTube. Please tell your friends, or if you are watching us right now, to just go a little bit lower and hit that subscribe button.
Yes, please.
And other than that, y'all have a Merry Christmas.
Yes. Have a Merry keyless Christmas, or key Christmas.
And COVID-free.
COVID-free, please. Tim, I'll see you next year.
All right. See you next year, David. Bye.
Bye.
You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.